I had bled through my pants and I had soaked the entire chair. Of course, it was a white chair. It was cream. My name is Jenna Dunlop. I am 57 years old. I have 2 grown children, and I'm a sole parent. I've been widowed for a long time. That's relevant to this introduction only because I'm used to doing things on my own. I'm a scientist, born and bred, came from an academic family, followed an academic path for quite a while. So yeah, you're looking at a middle-aged white scientist. I giggle because I have absolutely no idea. A few years ago, while in that most magnificent posture of having a pap smear, my doctor peered, up to look at me and said, "So, when did you hit menopause?" And I looked at him and I was like, "Menopause? I'm not anywhere near that." Like, I hadn't thought about it. And that was the first time that I really started to think about, am I in menopause? Have I reached that? I have enough understanding and I have a PhD in biology, and this is, I know a fair bit about the human body. And so I know how it works, but there was not one single thing that I can look back on and say, that was when I knew I was approaching menopause. And it's really quite sad to look back. And when you drop that filter over your experiences that says, was this menopause or was this perimenopause? It's like, of course it was. If there's one thing that we can get out of me talking to you and you guys, it's that this is happening to everyone, that this is real, and that things may be going sideways in your life because they're going sideways, but they also may be going sideways in your life because you're entering a whole aging stage that you're completely unaware of and unprepared for. I always recognized it, I guess, at some level, but it wasn't anything I paid attention to, that there is so much variation amongst women in how they experience these symptoms. So I'm just putting that out there to make it really clear that the stuff I'm talking about is for me and what I experienced. I have always been somebody who gets overheated really quickly. I'm a flusher, probably flushing right now. And I'm a sweater, which is so attractive, especially when you're like in high school and trying to get a date. So looking back now to say my early 50s, of course I was having hot flashes. Of course I was having night sweats, but I didn't see them as anything different from what I had always gone through. Anxiety. I've had a lot of depression in my life, and much of it very well earned, but I have never struggled with anxiety before. Until now, looking back, it's like, oh, bam, that was a thing. And I just thought it was one more piece of this buffet that you just get to live through when you're alive. So I never identified that. But yeah, I would say the hot flushes. And then what we're going to be talking about today, my periods were, I'm a writer. I have a lot of words and I don't know how to describe what started happening with that. That was the one thing that I asked for help on. And it was like, suck it up. So I think that women from a very early age learn how to keep on going. And that if you haven't left a limb behind, that you should just carry on your way. So there's an individual piece, but I also think there's a societal piece about, women just get the job done. Do I want to talk about stuff? I have no problems talking about things, whether it's this period or other things that have happened in my life when I feel that there's a reason to do it, I get so upset and angry and frustrated with stigma and shame around something as simple as having a period. I can't remember exactly when it started happening. I've always had very, very irregular periods. You know, I got my period, I think, when I was maybe 12 or 13. And from that time until now, I have never known when my period was coming. I think it had probably progressed quite a way before I realized that things were different. I wasn't just having a period anymore. I was having clots, very, very large, gross, uncomfortable clots. And I feel very fierce about being kind to myself, and that women should be kind to themselves, and we shouldn't say things like, oh, I'm so ugly, or I feel so gross. But I felt grotesque because my periods were so heavy that I was using the OB tampon, the Ultra. I don't even know if they sell them anymore. And they're like this big, right? It's like, looks like you're jumping onto a stubby lamppost. And it didn't matter. My periods were so heavy that the tampons were just actually flowing out, like they weren't. And so I would have this tampon in for whatever, to support the tampon industry, I guess. They didn't do anything for me. And I was getting to 2 maxi pads. And it was like, come on, right? And the only solution that I had at some point, and again, I'm not very good with times or dates, so I can't tell you exactly when, but at some point, I just stopped going out, right? I couldn't, and it was, awkward. But because I was traveling, I didn't have the same ability to stay in and to be in a safe place. So I was back in Toronto, and my girlfriend Jackie was like, that's it, we're going out to Piazza, I'm gonna take you for dinner. All-time favorite, most amazing restaurant, where they knew me. And I was sitting having dinner with Jackie, and I don't want to cry, but I might, because this is just the vibe. And I felt a clot drop, and I was like, oh my God, I said Jackie's my closest friend, so she knew all about this and was prepared, right? Because you have to be prepared for all eventualities. And so it was like, we got the check, and I was like, okay, we got to get home. And I stood up, and I had bled through my pants, and I had soaked the entire chair. Of course, it was a white chair. It was cream. And this is not something that you can walk away from and pretend that it didn't happen. Like, this isn't like, ooh, there's a spot of ketchup on the floor. This is like horrifying. And having just said that you can't just get up and leave, I jumped up and ran out of that restaurant. And this is a restaurant that I've been going to where I know the people. And I was so embarrassed, and I was so mortified, and I was humiliated, and I was ashamed. And my girlfriend, Jackie, took care of it. She went, she talked to the owner, she explained, like, there's a problem, and you're gonna have to pull this chair away. And I've never been back, never gone back to that restaurant. And that was years and years ago. If you're watching this, and if this is something that you're experiencing, like, I just want you to know it's real, and it really is this bad. So, right? So then, of course, little Miss Science, like, what the fuck is, sorry, I shouldn't swear. What's happening? And go to the doctor. And I had been talking to my doctor, right? And saying that this is happening. And it was such an easy and clear, I wasn't associating it, oddly enough, in my mind with perimenopause or anything, but this was something that was really impacting my life. And I had talked to the doctor, and the message essentially was, use more pads. Like that, she never said, like, well, what do you want me to do about it? But that was how I felt. And it's like, oh, for God's sake, like, really, I've got to do this alone too? So fine. That was basically what I thought my future was hiding literally in my house and only going out when I knew I was safe. And the only time I knew I was safe was for a couple of days after I'd had one of these periods. So fine. Fast forward to a completely different scenario, completely different situation, another ridiculously awful female health experience of having an internal ultrasound. And if you haven't had one, I wouldn't race out to get one. But essentially, the way that they do it is they take a magic dildo and they, insert it, and then you get an ultrasound that is, that's an internal ultrasound. And I had shown up for this, and there were 2 registered nurses who were running this session. And it doesn't matter why there were 2 of them, but they were lovely. And I got there and I had just started my period that morning. And I said to them, I think we need to reschedule. I've just started my period. And they're like, oh, for God's sake, honey, we're nurses. Like, we've seen everything. I was like, really? Well, fine then. Let's just see how this goes. And we finished that procedure. They had blood all over them. I was covered in blood. The sheet that horrible crunchy sheet that they, like, it was a horror movie. And I remember them looking at each other and going, what the is wrong with you? Why don't you have an IUD? And I was like, what? That's a thing? And she's like, oh, honey, we have IUDs. All the women we know have IUDs for exactly this reason. And I don't know, how profound can it be to accidentally learn that there is an easy, immediate solution to something that is really affecting your life? Anyway, so of course, off I tromp to my doctor. I get the freaking IUD. I get it inserted. I never had another drop of blood. I still bounce back and forth between falling down on my knees and thanking the heavens for giving me my life back. That's half of it. The other half is a rage and a fury with our medical system that has these tools available. Menopause is defined as the point at which you have gone 12 months without a period. And because I had this IUD, I have no idea when my periods actually stopped. There is something very fundamentally wrong with our world, with our system, that women are having to walk around. And I'm so privileged in my life that I am a self-employed writer. I can actually make a living and never leave my house. That is not the case for most women. What happens to women who are sole support for their family, who are bleeding the way that I was bleeding, and they don't know it's a thing? They are not being told that there's help for it, and they still have to go to work. How do you do that? This is shutting down your life. How do you have an intimate relationship if you're bleeding like this? Like, there's so many ways that this impacts women. Anyway, I can babble on, so I'll stop. The whole slaughterhouse image aside, the anxiety, the worse than normal hot flushing, all the rest of it, that sucks, for sure. It sucks. This time in my life is the best frickin' time I have ever had. And there is a freedom to that, an acceptance that, being a woman is hard, right? You've got to deal with being a human is hard. You know what I mean? Like, it's just hard figuring out who you are. And you know what? Menopause sucks. Without question, it's hard. And it can be very difficult because a lot of the things as women that we are consciously or unconsciously that we play into about, I've got to look a particular way or I've got to do this, it starts to change. Like, I'm not really happy that my skin is crepey now. And I know it's going to get worse. I'm not super happy that my throat, although it's always flushed, at least it was smooth. Not happening anymore. But you know what? I have now lived long enough that I know who I am and I know what I'm all about. And I don't have to apologize for anything anymore. And whether or not I was formally in menopause or not, the day when I realized how much I hated my hair and that I could actually go to a salon and ask them to give me a brush cut, and they did not want to do it, and I had to get into it with this young woman who's like, oh, you don't want to do that. Really? You're going to tell me what I want to do with my hair? But getting this haircut is the best thing that I have ever done for myself. I don't need to be able to identify that it's perimenopause or menopause or whatever. It's just, I have paid my dues as a human being on this world, on this earth, and I can now do whatever I want that makes me happy, with the, you attempt not to hurt other people and that kind of stuff. But I think we just don't understand how amazing it is to be an older woman in this world. Because you know what? Everyone can, they can meet me as I am. But it's like now I get to start living. And I don't think that I am the only woman who's in that time. I've done it all. I raised my family. I struggled. I suffered. I fought. I made it through all of these different things. And now, this time in my life is the payoff. I'm pretty happy. I'm also extremely happy that I'm not bleeding like that anymore. Let me just be clear. And if you're watching this, I hope that you recognize that you are not alone and that yes, it's awful, but it's going to pass. And there is a gift in all of this. And the gift is that you actually get to really understand who you are and what you're all about.
Thanks for watching this episode. For more menopause stories like this, subscribe below. And don't forget to click the bell so you are notified when we drop a new episode. Did you connect with this story? Let us know by adding your comment and by sharing and liking it. Shared storytelling helps us learn what's happening to our bodies and reminds us we are not alone.